All right, good evening. This is the October meeting of the Education Committee meeting of the Education Committee of the board. We have 3 presentations today. And before that, Dr. Yanni will share with us some information on the survey that was done to parents. We definitely are excited that our kindergartners have the opportunity to come back to school, and also some of our special education students. And we'll hear more about opportunities for our other students. So Dr. Yanni, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Sherpier, and good evening, everyone. We really want to thank all members of our community and our families who completed the choice surveys that we put out that asked parents and families to make a choice for right now for do they want their children to come back to school for in-person instruction or remain in our virtual program, our Cardinal Academy. So the percentages ranged by level and by building, but overall between 76 and 82% of the responses we received were for in-person instruction, and 18 to 24% were for continued enrollment in the Cardinal Academy. There was not a large variance necessarily in any one building in comparison to another. And over the weekend, we had communication with a number of families to talk about some specific questions that they had. Based upon these numbers, we are now working with our staff and identifying what our staff roles will be. And by the end of next week, as we noted in our Touch Base Tuesday communication, we will release a return to school plan, which will provide the community with a plethora of details about what the return to school will look like. And it will also include some additional frequently asked questions that we've gotten so that we can be as transparent as possible to the community. Wanted to let everyone know that right now the metrics are looking good for a return to school in November. And another vote, I know there's some concern in the community that another vote needs to take place for in-person instruction to resume. That is not the case. Our goal is to bring students back for full days in November. And one of the things we're looking at between now and the return to school date is making sure that we have all of the details, every scenario worked out so that we create conditions where kids and staff are safe, and that we also create conditions that should metrics change and we have some experience with positive cases of COVID, that we can navigate that without upending kids' schedules. Tomorrow or Friday, the community will receive a special communication from the district, and that special communication from the district will provide some information about some of the misconceptions that are out there right now about continuation of virtual instruction and return to in-person instruction. So that will come out tomorrow or Friday. In next week's Touch Base Tuesday, we'll continue to share the metrics we're looking at. And as I said earlier, at the end of the week, we will go ahead and share our full return to school plan. When we release that return to school plan, we'll also be scheduling an information session where we can address parent, guardian, and community questions at that time. So it's a very busy time in the district. As Mrs. Sherpier said, we did welcome our kindergarten students back, and we also welcomed some of our students in our special education program back, and all signs are pointing that it's been a positive experience for students moving forward. So with that, I'll conclude announcements and we can move on with our presentations.
All right, thank you, Dr. Yanni. I think we first need to take a look at the minutes from the September 9th meeting. Is there anybody on the committee or the larger board who has comments on that, on those minutes? No, then we can affirm the minutes of the September 9th meeting, I believe. Is that correct? I look to Mr. Sirota, who's always on top of.
Yes, assuming the committee agrees the date was September 9th, and those need to be approved by the committee.
All right. So do we need a vote on that?
Yes.
Yes, that's okay. All right. So I'd like to put in a motion to affirm the minutes of the September 9th Education Committee meeting.
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any nays? No. All right. Then the minutes for the meeting of September 9th are approved. Thank you. And then it's on to Dr. Yanni and the rest of his crew on the first presentation.
So tonight we'll, Dr. Perez, our Director of Student Services, and I will be co-presenting, albeit that Dr. Perez will be speaking probably a little bit more than I will. The community knows that we have been focused on creating systems that promote equity in our district for some time, and we're really excited tonight to announce a multi-year partnership with the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium. It's a group that Dr. Perez has worked with before, and this will allow us to be very targeted in our work to honor kids, honor staff, and make sure that we have true equitable practices in our school district. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Perez. And even though this is our first time presenting together, I think we're comfortable enough with each other that we can banter back and forth as we go through the information.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Yanni. I don't know if I have the ability to move the slides or not, but we can go ahead and move to the, oh, I might. No, nope, I don't. Thank you. So thank you, Dr. Yanni and the board of directors for the opportunity to speak with you tonight about this partnership that we're launching with the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium. As Dr. Yanni said, I have worked with MEC, as we call it, for many years in various capacities that I've had either in school districts or at the Department of Education. And I have found them to be wonderful to work with, really flexible, and really interested in meeting the needs of the individual communities that they're involved with. They have a very specific theory of change, which is central to what their work is in terms of increasing educator awareness, understanding, and skills. So we understand what those factors are that contribute to those inequities. Their theory of action is to co-create an environment. And if you have some understanding of culturally responsive practices, that the real main tenet of that is that co-creation of environment, knowledge, and instruction. And they really build their work on that. The results of the work that we intend to do with Mid-Atlantic really is to increase student access to high quality teachers and curriculum, increase student engagement, equitable discipline policies and practices, academic achievement of a variety of different student groups that we have here in Upper Dublin. So these results are not results that are intended to be short-term results. These are results that are intended to be long-term systemic results, because we know that in order to change systems and for them to be truly equitable, not only do we have to learn about equity and understand what that is personally and within a system, but simultaneously we have to work to change systems. And everybody needs to have a basis and an understanding of what that work is and why we're doing it.
And I think so far in the district, what we have is somewhat of we've laid the groundwork. We've been talking about equity. We've done some things as a result of the settlement of the federal complaint. We started detracking or continued detracking our buildings, providing greater access to higher level courses. Now it's really to take a look at our entire system. And there's so many different approaches to equity work out there, and so many of them focus on fixing a singular problem. And this isn't a process that's going to just have us check off boxes. This is a systems-wide change. This is a systems thinking change. And so everything from our policies to our protocols to the way we do things will be impacted by this engagement over the next couple of years.
Thank you. We'll take the next slide. Thank you. So in our journey with Mid-Atlantic, the first things first, we need to find out what the baseline is here in Upper Dublin. And we're going to do that by collecting some data in 3 different approaches. We're going to do an equity audit, conduct an equity audit, conduct a climate survey, and have some focus groups and listening tours. The equity audit is really comes in a number of ways. It's document reviews, it's school visits, it's data reviews of various elements. The 4 areas that we're going to look at are equitable school, equitable classroom, teacher behaviors that encourage student persistence, and then equitable school discipline. The equitable school and equitable classroom piece really come from a research base called the Elements of Equity Criteria for Equitable Schools. There are many equity audits that are out there on the market for sale for free, but Mid-Atlantic does a pretty good job of doing some comprehensive research and putting together tools that are current and make sense. The teacher behaviors that encourage student persistence it's a really interesting tool. And for those of us who are familiar with Charlotte Danielson's work, they'll recognize that the teacher behaviors are broken into broad areas: instruction, curriculum, classroom management, and interpersonal skills. Very, very similar to Charlotte Danielson, but not Charlotte Danielson, and actually based off of the work of Bessie Howard. And some of you may remember Learning to Persist, Persisting to Learn, where, what are those teachers' behaviors that encourage students to continue on in the work. For the climate survey, we're really looking. Go ahead. Oh, please.
Yeah. One of the things, if you read the language there, it says teacher behaviors that encourage student persistence. One of the things that I want the board to know, we're not just focused on the work that teachers are doing. We also need our administrators, our entire leadership team, to not only believe in the equity work that we're doing, but to really internalize the equity work. Because if we don't internalize those beliefs and we don't believe with or at our core that creating equitable opportunities for kids is the right thing to do, we're not going to get very far in this journey. So it's not just teacher behaviors, it's leadership team. There'll be board training, some of the training will even touch our community as well.
Absolutely. And before I move into the climate survey, when we get into that equitable school piece, we're talking about each individual school, and we're looking to see what the climate is in the school and the attitudes, behaviors of the administration as well. That's a huge piece of what happens in schools. Within the climate survey, some of the things that we want to take a look at is topics really around things like adult well-being and capacity, cultural competency, relationships, and in those climate surveys is an effectiveness of leadership component. We want to use these surveys to elevate teacher and student voice, to spark conversations and to be able to prioritize, our supports for teachers and staff. The focus groups and listening tours. So conversations are critical in advancing equity work. I think, we can't go through and do surveys and check boxes and think that we're going to build an effective plan unless we can actually hear from the folks in our community. So I'm in the process of working with Dr. Carmen Rowland and Mrs. Michelle Nutter, who are our facilitators from Mid-Atlantic, Michelle Nutter is actually Pennsylvanian. Dr. Nutter, she is in Maryland near the headquarters of Mid-Atlantic. And they will be working with us here in the district with that. But, you know, those focus groups and listening tours are going to be really interesting and are really going to help us get down to the heat, down into the meat of some of the information that we learn through our equity audit and climate survey. And, you know, they're going to really help us target what we need to do and where we need to prioritize our work as we build that multi-year action plan that includes professional development and systems changes to support all students. Dr. Yanni, did you want to add anything?
No, I just think, you know, one of the things, and the board has heard me say this before, I think school districts are notorious for not taking into account student voice as much as possible. And it's going to be really important for us to listen to what our kids are saying, and not just our high school students, but our middle school students and our elementary students as well. Because until we really understand how kids are feeling, we can't really get at the heart of this work. And, you know, to be clear, as we talk about culturally responsive practices, we're not just talking about equity in terms of race and ethnicity. We're talking about equity in all facets of our district.
Yep, thank you. Take the next slide, please. So just so the board is aware, and the community that's listening is aware, the work of equity, we're not waiting until we do the equity audits and do the climate surveys and have the report and next steps. That'll help us formalize large work that we're doing moving forward. There is work that is currently happening in regards to equity. This summer, teachers had an option of reading the book Stamped: Racism, Anti-Racism, and You by Dr. Ibram Kendi as part of their professional learning. And a group did do that. Stamped, if you are not familiar with it, is a book really targeted to young adults, grades 6 through 12, that really focuses in on what racism and anti-racism is and what it means to them as a student. It's a book that it's a thicker book. I wish I had my copy with me right now. But I read it in a day. It was good reading for me, and I highly recommend it if you haven't read it yourself. It's actually the young adult version of the adult version of Stamped, called Stamped from the Beginning. I've met a couple of times with those teachers to discuss the book and to talk about the types of work that they'd like to do moving forward as it relates to the book. And we're continuing to have those discussions and put some projects into place. Guidance counselors and school psychologists, huge role in the work of equity. And I've shared with them the equity position statements from their national professional organizations. And just today I met with guidance counselors and we were having a conversation about those position statements, and they're really excited to put those position statements into action. And we're looking to see how we can do that and update our district's K-12 guidance plan or 339 plan to reflect that anti-racism, diversity work, equity work within that document. As an aside, and to all of this, is we also talked with the guidance department about how we really need to look and update that 339 plan to reflect what we know now as a result of the pandemic, that a lot of work can be done virtually, and that all segments of the population will need to have access to be able to do work virtually. And we need to update our college and career programming to reflect that, so that our students are prepared for Zoom interviews, for example, and teleworking and those pieces. Dr. Yanni had talked about that the equity work isn't just for certain segments of our population, it's really for everyone. And having said that, I just submitted a grant to the Department of Ed for some money to help support training in universal design for learning. And this training and the work being done there will be highly supportive of the work that is happening in teaching and learning around blended learning. And so we're excited about that, to bring that forward. And then finally, culturally responsive practices. I think the end result and the end goal of some of the work that we're going to be doing with Mid-Atlantic is, we can change systems, we can change the way students access their education and the courses that they take. But if we don't do some work within classrooms to also make sure that what's happening within the classrooms are culturally responsive, then we can do all of that systems work, but nothing actually changes in the classroom for the kids. And so that's I think really the beauty of all of this work, is that it allows our team to really work together, to be synergistic in the work that we're doing and supportive of the work that's happening in teaching and learning supportive back in the work that's happening in student services.
The work that we're going to do with the consortium will also help us in developing our trauma-informed plan and really touch so many areas of our district. Our Equity and Empowerment Steering Committee had the opportunity to meet one of the representatives a few weeks ago, and that steering committee is going to be of great assistance in this work moving forward.
Yeah, Dr. Yanni, you mentioned the trauma-informed work, and trauma-informed work is really anti-racism work as well. They're intertwined, and so it's really important work that we're doing. I'm so pleased to have the support of the board and Dr. Yanni to get started to do this. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I think, do you want to finish the presentation and then do the questions?
I think that
all
was
at
the
end?
last slide. That was the last slide.
All right. Okay, good. Yep.
Short,
All right,
short number of slides, lots of information.
Yeah, no, exactly. Thank you so much, Dr. Perez and Dr. Yanni. I think Ms. Iannetti has her hand up, so go ahead.
Hi, I'm very excited that you are doing this work. And I'm just wondering, I know you said you've done it before, and Dr. Yanni, you've done this type of work before. Can you maybe give us a concrete example of maybe something you've done before that made a difference?
Dr. Yanni, do you want to start, or do you?
Sure. So in one of my previous districts, we did listening tours. So we did, we started with a climate survey. And out of that climate survey, one of the questions that we asked was we asked, do you feel that your gender, race, ethnicity, belief, do you see yourself reflected in the materials that are used in school, whether it's the books that we're reading, the textbooks, or what have you. Once we had that data and we did a listening tour, we actually dug down deeper and said to kids, okay, tell us why you feel maybe disenfranchised with some aspect of your education. And what we found was that some of our students of minority status didn't see themselves reflected anywhere in anything that we did in school. Everything from the literature that they were reading, to displays in school, to the events that we had in school, to honoring their customs and cultures. And so we were able as a system to go back and to refine that so that we were really being more inclusive. So that's one example of something that I've done. I'm sure, Dr. Perez, you have many examples as well.
I mean, so, similar to what you said, Dr. Yanni, and then also the work that, I've done with teachers and teacher leaders in working with them and training them to be equity leaders in their buildings, to not only go back and implement train the trainer kind of staff development for their colleagues in their buildings, but also to be a resource in their building for teachers who might have questions about equity and equitable access, and to be, frankly, to be a resource for their administrators as well. And to have, as a teacher, it's very hard to go to a principal and, say to them what you're proposing to do is really something that's unequitable. It's not it could be discriminatory. We want to make sure that we're not doing that. But the principals in the district knew very well that these equity leaders had received very specific training on these topics, and part of their role was to be able to really confront inequity and talk about it, and we were able to give them that tool to help them have that conversation with their administrator.
Mm-hmm. Something so simple as really digging down into attendance rates and then asking groups of students, what prevents you from coming to school, or what excites you about coming to school, what will make you feel more connected to going to school. Just something as simple as that in the hustle bustle of every day, we don't always think of. So when we do this kind of work and we give ourselves the opportunity to take a minute and take a deep breath and actually talk with each other and talk with kids, we can really start to make measurable gains in kids feeling good about school and kids feeling good about themselves.
And I would like to say too, I was participating on a webinar, because apparently that's all I do anymore is listen to webinars. And, he's actually a teacher in Philadelphia. His name is Matthew Kay, and some of you may have heard of him. He has a pretty big Twitter presence, and he's a leader in the equity work and the anti-racism work. And he had a great analogy about equity work, and he said it's kind of like it has to be very slow and deliberate in what you do, because you don't want to do equity work and do it for the shock and awe factor, right? You want to do it so that it is long-term, consistent, and very deliberate. And he used a baseball analogy. And so, the contact hitter has a very deliberate kind of swing and has a very purpose, and it's very methodical and very predictable. And then you go about doing this, and you're doing the work, and you're hitting the ball. And you're hitting the ball, and you're getting your base runs. Every once in a while, you have that moment, which is your home run, right? But that's not the only thing that we're doing, right? We're not just going for the home runs all the time. We're going for the consistent and ongoing impact of a system.
Sounds
Okay.
great. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Dr. Davis has her hand up, so please go ahead.
Yes, I too want to thank you for bringing this presentation to us. I think it is one component to help us make sure that we are getting all kids, to have the kind of excellent education that we provide here in Upper Dublin. So I think it's really important work. I'm wondering if there are any other school districts in our area that are involved in the consortium.
That's a great question. The Pennsylvania Department of Education just unveiled their Equitable Practices Hub, and they did that in partnership with the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium. Mid-Atlantic has had a pretty big presence in Pennsylvania because, well, we're one of their service states that they serve. So they're here. They do have relationships with other districts in Pennsylvania, but I will tell you that they maintain a sense of confidentiality with who they're working with. We talk about working with Mid-Atlantic, but Mid-Atlantic does not provide us with a list of districts that they work with, because sometimes they're working with districts on some pretty sensitive stuff, and they just won't do that. There are times though that Mid-Atlantic will say, we're working with XYZ's district, and they asked us if they could talk to somebody who's had experience in X, Y, and Z, whatever the topic, teacher leadership and how you're working through that. Would you be willing to talk to them? And then they'll make the introduction, but they won't just necessarily give us a blanket list of districts they're working with. So if you're interested in a particular topic and finding out, what other districts are doing in a particular topic or avenue or approach, I'd be happy to contact Mid-Atlantic and see if there were any districts that we could converse with.
I think one of the key pieces here, when the Department of Education released their Equity Hub, there were some surrounding districts that maybe didn't know about the consortium. And I think now people are, starting to learn more about it. So I'm glad that we have already started this engagement, because it guarantees that they're going to be with us. And one of the things I want to share with the board, this is all federally funded. So this work is not coming at a cost to the district. The cost to the district is really time for Dr. Perez and other members of our leadership team and teachers to work through the various things that we're going to be doing with our partnership, but there's no financial commitment. So it's all federally funded.
Yeah, that's actually a really great and important point. I'm glad you remembered. Mid-Atlantic, think of Mid-Atlantic as being like our federal IU in a sense, and they're charged with doing equity work across their service region, which goes all the way up to Maine, by the way. Maryland all the way up the East Coast to Maine, and the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. So maybe we can get a site visit to one of those islands.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay. Mrs. Franczyk, go ahead.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the student involvement. I was really happy to hear about the plans for involving them first in the discussions. One of the things that we've struggled with in the past with our equity work is finding a meaningful way to focus the work of this, not just on the adults, but on the students, and then to actively engage them in the work, not just to hear from them, but to find a role for them. So while I am extremely excited about what's starting, I just look forward to sort of that next phase. And I know we're supposed to take it slow, but I really hope that we can get to that point where we have students that are pulling along the work with us.
That's absolutely the goal, because, one of the things that we hear from kids, all the time is that, I heard it from kids in my last district too. When they leave our K-12 walls and they go to college or they go out into the real world, not every place is like Upper Dublin. And so it's important that we, equip kids with the skills and the confidence and all that they need to be successful beyond our K-12 walls.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we did in terms of also having teacher leaders have experience working with students as student equity leaders in their building, high school students in particular. And I think now more than ever with the things that we're seeing in the national landscape, it's really important to equip our students with the knowledge, skills, and the language to use so that they can, really work for justice in our society.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for this presentation. I'm very glad to hear that even though a good part of the work is going to be gathering data and information, that there are also activities going on at the moment to make things move forward, especially with guidance and or in the guidance department. And also I think really at the moment with a lot of people in remote learning situation, the whole concept of equity takes on a whole new perspective. And so I think this is a very timely thing to address. And I'm glad that the Mid-Atlantic group is providing a lot of guidance on that. So thank you.
Thank you.
And let's move on to a different topic, assessment and grading. And this is an update. Dr. Yanni, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to turn it over to Mr. Hoffman and to Mrs. Penner to talk about how we're working on grading, not only at the secondary level, but some insight to what elementary progress reports are going to look like. It's not a formal presentation, it's more of an update with more information to come in the coming weeks. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Hoffman and Mrs. Penner.
Sure, I'll get started with a little snapshot into what we're planning for elementary. So in the spring, when we looked at the essential learning targets for elementary school students, we really focused and had teacher input and collaboration around what truly were the essential skills that we were expecting kids or hoping kids would demonstrate competence of or the ability to perform, so the teachers could either observe or not observe those skills. We then looked at what the next layer was for kids. So what were they observing and what were they on the verge of doing? So that really helped inform not just teachers, but families, what the skills were that over the summer or next up, that they could start to help their kids practice and get ready for. We got really good feedback from both teachers and parents that the relevance of this information provided so much more concrete information about the skills and activities that kids needed to experience, rather than so much better than a 1, 2, 3 rating scale for some standards aligned language. So we're going to continue with that model for elementary, but what we're looking to do is add on to those skills that we're targeting. So maybe we highlighted 2 to 3 skills for ELA and math in the spring, knowing that during the spring a lot of activities were optional. We weren't held, we were, PDE waived the 180-day mandate, so we weren't held to some of the same criteria that we are right now. So with school being school, and we're accounting for those 900, 990 hours right now, we're going to be working with our grade level elementary teams to identify additional standards-based skills to collect data on. We're not looking at formal assessments. We're really looking at anecdotal records, running records, observations, formative assessments, and work samples, so that teachers can really use that to guide next steps for kids. Secondary, we're really not looking, and Dave, feel free to jump in, we're not really looking 6 to 12 at many significant changes around the weighting of assessments and grading, but what we're really looking and charging teachers with is looking for ways to provide authentic opportunities for students to demonstrate skills. So things they can't Google, things that they have to apply, things that require higher level thinking, things that are more practical and oftentimes could even be interdisciplinary. So we're really looking at ways that kids can engage in assessments that are more meaningful. Dave?
No, I think that I wouldn't add anything besides the elementary progress report. It's important that we remember that these are snapshots of a moment in time. So it's not they were struggling for 4 weeks and finally got it, so they have an 80%. It's on those trimester periods with those essential skills. What do we see our students doing? And what would the next step be? So that's the benefit of that standards-based approach that we're talking about, so that we're not hung up on, did we hit the 3 and we're going to stay at the 3? But even when you hit that 3, there's a next step. First grade continues, fourth grade continues. So what's the next step? And that's what this report that we had in June offered. And it had that collective, what can I do? What will the teacher do? What can the student do? What can a parent do to help with those next steps? And that'll be our vision moving forward.
And I think it's really important to, when Mrs. Penner said that we need to report on what kids are doing well and then what they're on the verge of doing. Last year, the board will remember that we engaged with the Center for Educational Leadership for targeted professional development with our principals and our supervisors. And we spent a lot of time focusing on continuous improvement and what are teachers on the verge of doing? What are they good at and what are they on the verge of doing? And it's the same sort of philosophy with our kids. What are they demonstrating proficiency with, and what with a little push are they able to do to take it to that next level? Being in a virtual environment right now, thinking about assessment, in the past we gave the Renaissance Star assessment. And quite frankly, when I looked at the way that we were giving those star assessments were really, we were giving too much weight to those assessments and making too many decisions on solely on one data measure. So I'm not saying that they won't come back at some point, but one of the things that we want to be more mindful of is to look more comprehensively at students and what are they able to really do, and not just rely on clicks on a computer to provide that information. So, kudos to Dave and Meredith, but also to our elementary teachers for really focusing on, what are the essential skills and standards that we're working on with kids, and not watering anything down. It's important that people understand that we're not talking about watering content down, but what we're really focusing on is going deep with content, going deep with standards, so that kids internalize what they're learning and can carry it on moving forward.
All right. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, anybody from the board? All right, well, I'll add one question then. In terms of the standard-based skills in elementary, do you plan to extend that into the high school? I can imagine that, or especially with a push towards blended learning, you may be exploring something in that direction as well, or something entirely different. Can you expand on that a little bit?
That will be a work in progress, I'm sure. And I don't want anybody at home panicking about anything I might be thinking without having a chance to sit around the table and get there. I think really blended learning is helping us focus on what is a specific skill or standard, as you mentioned, and how do we unpack that in a way that allows all students to access that standard and to meet that standard and then have a next step from that standard. So certainly I just as the closure has forced us to pause and think about how and why we do things, I'm sure that blended learning will help us get to that point at some point, but we're not quite there yet.
Steve, I would just add on in a sort of combination with what you just said, and Steve shared earlier about our work with the Center for Educational Leadership, that as our staff and administration becomes even more solid with our understanding of what our look-fors are and what those standards look like and what kids are really being asked to do and why, that really drives their creation of these more authentic assessments. So I think it's an exciting progression, and I definitely think this closure is accelerating our progress on that.
And one other question, how do the students perceive this standards-based? Do they feel more ownership, and do they see their own growth as they look at this grading system?
In a perfect world, I would like to tell you yes. I don't know that we're at that level yet with our elementary kids where we're doing true deep reflection. But one of the things that some of our secondary teachers have talked about during the period of virtual learning is that they see kids reflecting more on their learning now than they were previously. So I think one of our challenges, one of our good challenges, some of the good work ahead is really to get kids to really make overt their metacognition about their own learning and where they're, getting away from I'm smart or I'm not smart, and really helping kids to understand, where they are in terms of their learning progression and how and what they can do to further their learning. I think that's our next real step.
Catlin Tucker's blended learning work and the work that our teachers engaged in with her course and with the books, the playlist, a big piece of that is that student self-assessment piece. And she, in her most recent works, has really taken it to a level where a student sits down and facilitates, a learning conference with their teacher, and what they've learned about themselves as a learner, what their goal areas might be. And we've had some really surface level conversations about that as an Ed Leaders team. And we want to dig into that work because that's really important work, but we want to get that right.
No, I totally agree, and I'm excited that hopefully that we'll see a presentation on that in the future at some point. Dr. Davis, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm wondering how we are helping our parents to understand this new way of reporting progress on their children, because every time there's a change, sometimes they're not sure exactly what it means. So I'm just wondering what we've built into our system to help them truly understand what we're doing.
One of the good things, Dr. Davis, the way that we did progress reports at elementary in the spring and how they'll look after this first marking period, I think it's almost a benefit to parents and guardians because it provides real clarity about how their kids are learning and what are some real actionable steps that they can take to further learning. I think one of the things that I think districts haven't done a great job at is explaining the 3-2-1 system. And so as we move through this year, in the Touch Base Tuesday, we talked about having a series of parent information sessions, family information sessions, and that's a great topic to be able to really to dig in with families on, to help them truly understand where their students are performing and where their expectations are and how we're moving them forward.
All right, thank you. Seeing no other questions, let's move on to the education and legislative updates. That's the presentation. And Dr. Yanni?
Yes, so thank you, Mrs. Sherpier, and Ms. Evans, if you can go to the second slide, that would be great. So tonight, I want to review with the Education Committee the proposed science standards. And those standards are really focusing on process and content, and then also review some potential outcomes and impact of a piece of legislation that could be voted on towards the end of October, which is Senate Bill 1216. So we'll walk through both of these topics in this presentation. So normally I don't like to read what's on a screen, but I want everyone to soak this in for a little bit. Pennsylvania began developing its current set of science standards in the mid-1990s and adopted them in 2002, 5 years before the first iPhone was invented. In 2010, a revised version of science standards was posted on the Education Department's website, but was offered only as a voluntary resource for schools. So in a time where most school districts looked at the next generation science standards and really propelled forward their rigor in science curriculum, Pennsylvania hit the pause button, and that pause button has been pushed for a long time. Now, to Upper Dublin's credit, over the years, Kim Small and Dave's predecessor both took on the challenge of looking at the next generation science standards and did do some work to beef up the science curriculum. So we're not all the way back at using standards from 2002, but the new standards are integrated and will increase the rigor of science instruction all the way from elementary through 12th grade. And like all of our presentations, this presentation will be up on the website. And as you can see, Pennsylvania is only one of 6 states that over the course of time did not adopt the next generation science standards. And I think what we're seeing in our state is that elementary students perform relatively well on the 4th grade science PSSA, and that's largely because it's a reading assessment. And they struggle a little bit more on the 8th grade science assessment because it captures information from 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. And then our kids do quite well on the biology keystone. But I think we'll start to see, as the new standards are put into play, a different level of rigor, which will help our students, not only in Upper Dublin, but across the Commonwealth, start to really excel in science, and especially in the area of STEM and the almost forgotten E, engineering, which comes out very vividly in these standards. Next slide, please. So this slide really just captures what I was saying before. Our state has not been, let's say, the leader in science instruction. And as I said, Upper Dublin has done a good job of updating things along the way, but we know that we can do more in science. And one of the things that, as we focus on continuous improvement in our district, many times, and I'm speaking as a former elementary science or elementary teacher, I was never formally developed in teaching science. And so I know I probably taught misconceptions, and I probably watered down content more than I should have. And a lot of that was just a lack of training on my part. As we talk about the standards tonight, you'll see that there's going to be a real need for training professional learning for teachers so that we give them really the resources they need to deliver curriculum aligned to these standards. So you can go to the next slide. Pennsylvania developed a vision for science, and one of the things that comes through, I'm not going to read this, it'll be up on the website, but one of the things that the state is not looking for is for just for students to be able to regurgitate facts. There's some baseline knowledge that students need on every grade level and in every grade band, but really the focus must be how to integrate that information and be able to apply scientific thinking and concepts to different situations. So one of the things, one of the reasons that these standards are integrated is so that we're no longer going to be teaching science in isolation, discrete units in science. We'll be teaching it under the umbrella of scientific thinking. Next slide, please. So the integrated standards for science, environment, ecology, technology, and engineering K-5. The integrated standards for environment and ecology 6 through 12, and another layer of technology and engineering standards K-12. As we look at these standards, we don't just throw out everything we've done. What we'll need to do is create a gap analysis. So we'll have to look at these standards in comparison to our science units and our planned curriculum and look at where we're not meeting the standards, or we're not meeting the standards deeply enough, and also look at where we are doing a good job with the standards. And we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But what we do want to do is be able to refine our scope and sequence in science to really be reflective of the rigor that is expected in these standards. Next slide. The domains and core ideas for K-12 are listed on this slide. So if you look on the left-hand side of your screen, at the elementary level, we have physical science, life science, earth and space science, and environment and ecology. And in each of those domains, there are a number of topics that will be taught under that umbrella. Now, I said a very dangerous word, and that word is topic, because what we don't want to do is just teach topics. We want to teach content in the scheme of science, in the overall arc of scientific thinking. So as we, as Ms. Small and Mr. Hoffman work with our science teachers, we'll be looking at our existing curriculum, looking for redundancy and looking for gaps, and then really thinking about how to use developmentally appropriate practices to build curriculum around these standards. These standards are much more closely aligned to the next generation science standards than the previous or our current Pennsylvania science standards. At the secondary level, we have physical science, life science, and earth and space science. So again, we don't see an overhaul of the curriculum, we see more of a refinement. And it was asked earlier by someone, does things like the learning that takes place in the planetarium or at Robbins Park, does that go away? And again, we're not overhauling any of our, we're not overhauling the program. We're simply making sure that we're more tightly aligned to these standards. Next slide.
Dr. Yanni, as the slide transitions, I would just add that our science program is in its year one review. So the bringing of our curriculum review cycle. So these standards coming at this time is a perfect time for us as we're beginning to explore our current program.
Thank you for that, Mr. Hoffman. That's a really important point. So it's, we're not midway through, a K-12 rewrite and all of a sudden we have new standards. So it does come at a good time. In the world of STEM, technology and engineering, the standards focus much more on the E, the engineering part of that acronym, and you can see that the core ideas that there are listed. One of the things that I think we're going to see in our state is a much greater emphasis on STEM. We've had an emphasis on STEM, but it really hasn't taken root the way that it needs to take root. STEM activities are usually used to engage kids, to get them to like science, but really STEM is really at the core of all science learning. And so you'll see a greater emphasis around the idea of engineering as we do the work in science through these standards. Next slide. So let me stop there and ask, are there any questions about the science standards before we move on to what is coming in some pending legislation with Senate Bill 1216?
I see Mr. Sirota. Go ahead.
Thanks. I just, whenever we talk about standards, I just always feel like it's wise to clarify the, let's say, the difference between standards and curriculum. Do you want to?
Sure. So right. So standards alone are not curriculum. Standards set the minimum expectations of what kids have to know and be able to do at each grade level and in each area of a subject. And then we use those standards to build curriculum around it. What are the, essential learnings? What are the, what are the assignments? What are the assessments? What are the experiments and activities we're doing? So the standards are really the root of everything, but keeping in mind that they're the minimum expectations. They're not the ceiling, they're the floor. Thanks for that, Mr. Sirota.
Dr. Yanni, with the emphasis or shift towards engineering, do you expect there to be more of a need for staff with engineering background? And if so, where will we find those individuals?
So I think the answer to that question is yes, but it's not just a yes in Upper Dublin. It's really a yes across the Commonwealth and across the country. One of the things that we feel very strongly about is we need to not only offer courses that kids are attracted to, but we need to offer courses that prepare kids to be successful once they're away from us. And so I would see probably over the next 3 to 5 years a much heavier emphasis on engineering, and some of our science pathways from middle school through high school, and even starting at elementary, may start to look very different than they do now.
All right, thank you. Let's go on to the legislative issues related to PSSAs and Keystone.
All right, so Senate Bill 1216 has a few areas to it that I want to brief the committee this evening about, because you'll hear more about all of these points in the coming weeks. So if the Senate approves 1216 and the governor signs it into law, there will be a suspension of Keystone exams, and Keystones are the end of course exams in Algebra 1, Biology, and English Literature as a local requirement until 22-23, school year 22-23. So just for everyone's edification, Algebra 1 is taken on multiple grade levels whenever students complete our Algebra 1 course. Biology at the end of 9th grade, and then English Literature is typically taken at the end of 10th grade. So if Senate Bill 1216 becomes law, those taking and passing those Keystone exams will not be a local graduation requirement until school year 22-23. Part of the bill is also the potential ability to opt out of exams for courses taken last school year and this school year due to the unusual circumstances with the mandated closure last year and a large number of districts being in a virtual or remote environment this year. There will be the potential ability to opt out of those exams, which has an effect for accountability. The board knows that each year the state moved towards the PA Future Ready Index, and part of that index is you're graded or scored on how well students do on PSSAs and the keystones. With potential opt-outs, the future Ready Index will most likely take a different form, which will impact teacher evaluation and a couple other big processes in the school district. Within this legislation, there's also the potential for our Pennsylvania Department of Education to apply for federal waivers if the federal government provides relief to ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act. So last year there was a federal waiver. Pennsylvania accepted that waiver, and we did not give the PSSAs or keystones. It has yet to be determined if those same waivers will be available this year or not. And we probably won't know if those federal waivers will be available until sometime post-election. But I do want to note that at the bottom of this slide, the funds to score the Keystone exam for this year are not in the state budget. So when Pennsylvania approved the budget for this year, they approved a partial year budget. And while most of K-12 education was funded for the full year, this is one of the line items in the education budget that was not funded. So right now, Pennsylvania has no funds dedicated for scoring Keystone exams for this school year. And that comes at a multi-million-dollar cost. And so over the next couple of weeks and over the next couple of months, there's likely to be some budget wars in our state as the second part of the budget is built. And although we were excited that most line items in the education budget were funded for a full year, we are very concerned about what that's going to mean for the second part of the budget, because there's only so much money to go around, and there's broad thought that some of the education funding will be rerouted to other areas of the Commonwealth's budget. So we'll keep the board tightly in the loop on that as we move forward. The state realizes that right now, pre-service teachers are in a unique spot. Sort of an interesting story. The day that we had to evacuate Fort Washington Elementary last year, we had a number of student teachers start that day. So their student teaching experience started with evacuating a building, and then partway through their student teaching, we had a governor mandated shutdown. And so they didn't have the ability to complete their student teaching. The state has recognized this, and so they are providing, hopefully with this legislation, some certification flexibility that will allow these pre-service teachers to be hired for a period of time, typically a year, until they can take and pass their praxis test. Pennsylvania has long been talking about a teacher shortage, and the teacher shortage really is upon us now, because there are not many folks going into education, and so the pandemic has just exacerbated that problem. After 6 years of teaching, or within the first 6 years of teaching, teachers have to convert their certificate from a level 1 to a level 2, which means a permanent certificate. The state is also giving flexibility there, because that requires teachers to get graduate credits and also do some additional assessment. So there's some certification flexibility there. But the state has been very clear that they are not providing any flexibility for teachers teaching outside of their certification area. And that's actually something we're thankful for, because while there are unique circumstances, it becomes very difficult for teachers to have to teach outside of their certification area and to help students to progress academically. Next slide. There are some COVID-19 impacts in Senate Bill 1216. So although Montgomery County is already doing this, it will become, if this legislation is approved, that state and local health departments will be required to notify school entities when teachers, staff, students have tested positive for COVID. And that also extends to independent contractors and volunteers. That's not happening everywhere across the Commonwealth. And also within 24 hours of receipt of such notice, schools have to notify all stakeholders of the positive case. Schools must provide educational support to any student who is not permitted to attend schools as a result of any reported case of COVID-19. And so there are still districts that don't have virtual programs, that they don't have options for kids. And so if this Senate bill becomes law, they'll be required to have some level of support for kids who are ultimately unable to come to school because of COVID-19. There are 3 other impacts. So districts, if you transported kids prior to March 13, 2020 to non-public schools, you'll be required henceforth to transport students, non-public students, during this school year and all school years moving forward. Our special education assistants need to do 20 hours of professional development every year that's targeted to their position. And so there's some flexibility. There's a year reprieve there that will allow an additional year for our educational assistants to get their training and their hours. And not every district provides those hours for their educational assistants. Many districts, their educational assistants have to find those hours on their own. We provide those hours for our staff. And then the Secretary of Education can waive the NIMS and the NOCTI assessments. Those are career and technical assessments that our students who attend Eastern Center for Arts and Technology would take. So we will likely hear more about Senate Bill 12 within the next 2 to 3 weeks. And as I said before, we'll keep the board informed as we hear more information.
All right, thank you, Dr. Yanni. Are there questions from the committee? Dr. Levinowitz, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to state that tomorrow is Virtual Advocacy Day for PSBA. I know some of us will be attending, and we have meetings set up with some of our local legislators. And at our 9 a.m. Overview, we'll be briefed on the legislation that's pending right now, and 1216 is definitely one of the items that'll be brought up tomorrow. So if you can attend that Virtual Advocacy Day tomorrow, even just at 9 a.m. and then at 1 and 1:30, where I believe we all got invitations to meet with some of our legislators. That would be great. If you have any questions, please reach out to me.
All right, thank you, Dr. Levinowitz. Other questions? Dr. Yanni, I believe that there are 2 windows typically for Keystone exams, one in the December and then one in the spring. How is that going to run this year if 1216 passes, and if it doesn't, are there things we need to do, given that we're under a different situation than we typically are?
So intermediate units poll districts, and most districts are doing very few, if any, assessments during the first wave, the winter wave. Everyone is going to wait, or the majority of districts are waiting until the spring wave, the second wave, to see what the outcome of Senate Bill 1216 is. And one of the things that is still not clear in this legislation, yes, there's an opt-out, but there are several pathways for students to graduate, with the Keystones being removed as one of the pathways. And so it will be hotly debated what those other pathways will be. And I anticipate hopefully next month at this committee meeting to be able to provide an update to the committee on how everything turned out.
All right, great, thank you. If there are no further questions, then I think we can move on to the next agenda item. And that is, we have 2 recommendations, one for a consultant, Mrs. Butler, Melanie Butler, to continue working on the Connections program, and then also one for Padlet, the Padlet backpack access. I think, Mr. Hoffman, do you have any comments on the, or on any of these items, or Dr. Perez or Mr.
Yes.
Patel? Okay, sure. Yeah.
So the Connections program is something that is ongoing yearly, and we met with Ms. Butler last week. Dr. Yanni, Ms. Penner, and I met with her and talked through what it would look like, ensuring that we'll need to be inclusive of students that may be virtual and that may be in person, and the topics are continuing to evolve based on those needs. And so we're excited about the ideas that she has coming forward, and it is a really positive experience for our students.
I would just add on that one of our goals and our continued goals of this work would be to build capacity in our district staff, so that as we continue to value Mrs. Butler's experience and the expertise that she brings to this program, we really want to build our own capacity as a district too, to just sort of extend the safe networks for all students as we work through our, in Dr. Perez's work earlier tonight about the equity work that we're doing. This is another layer that we can continue to improve upon.
All right.
And then regarding
regarding
Padlet backpack, Padlet is simply an online, like a bulletin board, but it's used for adding content, collaboration, community building for classrooms or other groups. The free account has a limited ability, much similar to the conversations that we've had with some of the other resources that we've come to Ed Committee for this year. Nice feature of Padlet, so a teacher can pose a question, a topic, can just be an open board that students can generate ideas, but students can respond with text, links, videos, files that they've created, images that they feel represent a specific idea, and then reply, simply heart or like some of the features. I saw some of our teachers, secondary teachers, were having students create their locker as a getting to know you activity for our students. So they were actually creating virtual lockers, and it was an opportunity for students to create, to share some pictures of their family and their pets and their hobbies. And it was a nice community builder as we were virtually. Because it's a Padlet backpack account, what it does is create school district-wide access. It is unlimited, and the nice feature is teachers can utilize Padlets and setups and prompts that their colleagues are creating. So it creates some universal collaboration as well. This will be funded by the CARES funds as, if approved.
Great, thank you. And are there any questions on the committee or the board? If not, then I think we can move this on to the legislative agenda, so we can do that. And then now we are ready for community input. I think we have received a couple of items, or let's see, I believe we had a couple of community input from that were submitted already. So I think we can read those, and then if there are other people who want to speak, we'll ask them to come to the virtual microphone. So the first community input is from Amy Reardon and Maple Glen. She wants to share with the board that I just need to let it be known that my kids are struggling mentally right now. For those that is working for, I'm glad to hear, but it is not working for our family. Very concerned for one of my kids especially, and the changes I have seen in her. We should be given a choice. There is no reason to not be back in school at this point. Almost all schools are back in other counties. Please do the right thing, put the kids first. Let those of us who want our kids to go back to school go back. My children are not in elementary school, so virtual learning is not a childcare issue for us. This is also not a learning issue. The UD teachers have gone above and beyond in this situation to teach these kids, and they should be commended. This is a mental health issue. Sitting in a room by yourself, staring at a computer monitor all day is just depressing, and many of these kids are not doing okay. I emailed earlier in the week and feel compelled to email again. My heart breaks for these kids. Now stadiums can have fans and restaurants can have patrons inside, and we still don't have kids back in school when we could. But you are denying them of this. You need to be the right thing and get them back to school in some capacity ASAP. The pandemic isn't miraculously going away. We would need to move forward, not sit and do nothing. Virtual learning does not work for kids. Our district prides itself on high standards, high test scores, high college acceptance rate, and none of that matters right now. The district is letting our kids down. That was Miss Reardon. Then Raluca Papadopoulou from Drescher. One of the previous metrics for reopening as recent as August 21st to 27th was the availability of staff. Staff to open buildings to resume in-person instruction is less than 10% of the staff is requesting leave or workplace flexibility. It was not met at the time. How is the district prepared to manage that metric? And is there a chance that it will reoccur? It did not show in the September metrics. Why is the school district waiting to reopen on November 9th when the transmission rates are likely lower in October than in November? As teachers become more essential this winter and everyone is concerned about their safety, are they required or mandated to get a flu vaccine? What is the school district's commitment on essential workers' children? Then input from Jessica Smuggler at Maple Glen. The teachers and support staff have been doing an amazing job. However, this is not enough. The children's mental health is taking a huge toll. We're dealing with meltdowns and depression with our children. They need to be in the classroom. They need to see their friends. They need to see people other than a caretaker and not be behind a computer screen all day. They do not need the stress of remembering what time to switch to their orchestra lesson or speech meet. They need to be able to have a side conversation with friends about their weekends. These young children don't have phones to call their friends and talk when it's convenient to them. This could easily be done safely in the classroom. My children wore masks at summer camp in 95-degree weather, and they will do it in the classroom. They want to be back. Their teachers express all the time they want them back in the classroom, and their classrooms are ready to go. This virus is not going away. The numbers will never be zero. We flattened the curve. We need to make sure we get our children into the classroom safely and ASAP. Everything is pointing to them going back. They need to be back. Then Eric Dreisbach from Maple Glen. Will students in the elementary schools be assessed similarly to how same-age students were assessed in the fall of 2019? Will marking periods reports for the fall 2020 be similar to the marking reports for the fall of 2019? How will the district assess the effectiveness of its fall 2020 online learning methods such that it could make changes and improve its methods of online learning improve its methods of online learning if it's still required in the winter and spring? Then Jackie Spinoza from Ambler, please have them go back to school full time. And McLaughlin in Orland, in my opinion, all school personnel are essential workers. My husband and I are both in healthcare, and we have successfully navigated this new normal with our respective jobs. Neither one of us was comfortable with going to work and coming home to our families in the beginning, but had no choice in doing so. We either did or we lost our jobs. We have protected ourselves and therefore our children over the past 6 months. It's time for UD to show us their plan for getting these kids back to school safely, if we choose to do so. Just as people have chosen to come to my place of work as well as my husband's. Enough talk. Action and transparency is essential now. We have, let me see, Ashley Verbitsky from Maple Glen. I have been so disappointed with the school board's response to this year. There were no options presented to us except all virtual. No consideration of the hardship and added expense that this places on parents, not to mention how far it is getting, setting our kids back and how much they are struggling in this platform. They need in-person instruction. We are not teachers. My kids attend the township program, which is 50 kids crammed in an old golf building. How is that any better or safer than being in a controlled classroom? Leave those that are high risk and exposure concerned to remain virtual. But let anyone who's willing return. And if your teachers are refusing, then that should be addressed via discipline. Nurses certainly don't have the option to say they're not comfortable returning to work, nor do grocery workers, postal workers, frontline workers, and any of us regular working business class people. Go to work or don't get paid. Put the kids first, like the surrounding districts. Use our excessive tax dollars to get ahead of the curve, not lag behind. Be creative. Elementary must return. Then Rebecca Reason, Fort Washington. When will we learn of the parent survey results? What they mean for teacher assignments in our school, and when will bus routes be posted? Has the board been meeting or consulting with healthcare professionals or other boards on how their return to school plans have been working and what needs to be improved? Why are there dates for teachers in service and voting, but not nothing to do with return to school, but not the important dates on when parents will be informed of all next steps? This has been a hardship on our children and working families. As much as many of us would like to stay home and stay away from others, our children are suffering losses in many ways. We have wonderful teachers and administrators who have been guiding our students for many years, and it's not the same in a virtual environment. We hope you will hear our pleas that we should have a choice and that education is right and is critical and essential. Please put aside your personal feelings. If you've been participating by or observing what is going on during the elementary day, I find it hard to believe that anyone observing the lower grades would agree that there is no difference between virtual and in-person. As a parent of 2 elementary school students, their learning and behavior styles couldn't be more different. I'm constantly having to encourage and redirect just as a teacher would. This does not work for working families. At this point in our journey of living with COVID, I find it hard to believe that we can't open it up safely. Will it be different? Yes. Will there be challenges? Yes. There are no outbreaks when hundreds of people are getting sick at one school. Our community has done a good job of keeping our counts low, and we can't control the rest of the country, state, or the USA. We took the time to learn something from others. Now it's time to put that into action. Thank you. Lorraine Smith, Ambler. I need to know why we are looking at data for community spread to decide whether or not to open schools. Schools are not adding to community spread, and therefore you have no right or obligation to keep them closed. If any one school is open, they should all be opened. They were all closed for the same reason, and they should all be open for the same reason. It's been proven that it can be done. It's a controlled environment, and anyone who's uncomfortable with sending their kids to school can continue virtually. This is a disgrace that we continue to punish our kids. We have no right to take my child's education away because other people are scared. I've heard parents give reasons for their decision to send or continue virtually, ranging from what their friends are doing to classes offered and teacher assignment. When did this become about that? It's either safe or isn't. Point blank, this is a disgrace. And I think I'm gonna take a break with the reading of the comments and see if there's anybody in the audience that would like to speak? Can we?
Ms. Evans can facilitate that.
Yes, exactly. Sorry, I lost for a moment my screen here.
Ms. Evans, can you?
Go ahead, Mr. Windheim.
Hi. Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Justin Windheim. I am from Dresher, Pennsylvania, and I have 2 students in 4th grade and kindergarten. I just want to take a moment to recognize Cardinal Academy. Apparently, we seem to be in the silent minority on this issue, and I think it's important to thank the district's leadership team and the school board for making the best of a difficult situation. My kindergarten daughter lost her teacher in-person learning when she remained virtual, but when she logged in on Monday morning, her Maple Glen teacher had a Thomas Fitzwater cheetah shirt on just to make the Fitz kids feel welcome. Little things like that go a long way. Of course, I wish she were in school, but she's learning as much as ever and is quickly adapting to this style of instruction. As far as socialization, my kids interact with their classmates virtually, and then they see their neighborhood friends for socially distanced lunch and after-school play. So the idea that all kids need in-person school for socialization is just incorrect. While I know that plans are made in place for additional grades to offer in-person learning again, I hope there is great caution. Doctors and experts agree that as the weather turns colder, forcing us indoors for longer, and with flu season also upon us, things have the ability to go very badly very quickly. Numbers are already on the rise, and I urge you to think about your teachers who might be forced into a situation they're not comfortable with. My wife is an elementary school teacher in a neighboring district, and if she were being forced back into a classroom in November, I'd be very concerned for the health of my family, especially our older relatives who are also our caregivers. I understand each family is different, and many were and are struggling to make this work, but please follow the doctors and heed their warnings if and when they arise. And if everyone is back in a virtual setting after schools are forced to shut down again, I hope that each child is able to return to their original teacher and class that they're started with, if at all possible. You have worked tirelessly and seamlessly to plan and prepare for this already, and I'm confident that you will continue to do so to ensure the success and emotional well-being of all of our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Windheim. Mrs. Evans, can you put on the next person? I see a few more hands.
Go ahead, Ms. Berry.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, good evening. I just want to, again, like Mr. Windheim mentioned, show my appreciation for the Virtual Academy. For those of you that have heard me on calls before, I am full in on my students going back. However, I will say that this year is better than it was last year. My students currently, I'm in Dresher, and I have a kindergartner and a 4th grader, like Mr. Windheim, but mine are at Jarretttown. And my 2 sons are actually going to a center each day where they do the virtual school with staff members there. I do know that the staff members do struggle making sure the kids are on their Google Meet at the right time and making sure they have all the assignments turned in. But overall, my kids are not miserable. I will fully admit that. I think some of it is because they're at that center and they have the socialization, which is great, but it's not ideal. I'll definitely say that. So I really just wanted to speak today because I had a couple questions. I know Dr. Yanni mentioned that the utopia would be to get the kids back full day. So my question is that what we're working towards? Are we working towards 5 days in school, or is that dependent on the number of kids that want to come back? And then my impression was always for a school day to be counted, that lunch had to be served. Like if it was a half day, I thought you had to feed children. So I'm wondering how they're getting away with that for the kindergarten, as well as what will happen when all grades return. I wanted to know, are we working towards hybrid, or again, is that based on how many kids want to come back? I wanted to know if there's any type of staffing issue we know of right now. Again, as a past teacher, yes, if I was asked to go back right now, it is nerve-wracking for the teachers, but like everyone else stated, the essential workers have no choice. So, you know, grocery workers are back, Walmart workers are back, medical workers are back, and if they don't go back, they don't get paid. So I do have sympathy for the teachers and the union, but, you know, if we need them back, they need to go back, or maybe they need to take a year off. And then my last question was, is there any chance that ending grades are going to return before November 9th? I know originally, I think they said 1, 2, 6, and 9 could maybe go back on the 4th. However, that's only 3 days early. I mean, that's really not a big deal. So if it's working for kindergarten, why can't we roll out, you know, 1 and 2 next week or the following week? Why are we waiting 3 more weeks or 4 more weeks? I don't understand that. Okay, thanks. That's all I needed.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Ms. Evans, can you let the next person in?
Go ahead, Ms. Stein.
Hello, this is Andrew Stein, and I live in Fort Washington, and I'm currently a junior at Upper Dublin High School. I wanted to speak tonight from a student's perspective on virtual learning. So I know that we are planned to go back in person November 9th, and I do not understand why we must wait until then. And I really hope that the board realizes how virtual school does not work for so many of us. I would do anything I'm asked to do to be back in school for in-person learning. I would wear a mask all day. I would stay distant from all of my classmates. I would even eat lunch on my own every day, anything it takes to be back in school. And staring at the screen all day is really hurting me mentally and physically. And a lot of other students feel the same way that I've talked to. And I have some classes where for an hour and 30 minutes straight, I just listen with no physical or verbal interaction, which is extremely difficult to do. I then get a 5-minute break, which I usually spend just loading into my next class. So within my school day, I spend a total of 5 hours and 20 minutes sitting in the same spot, staring at the same screen, essentially doing the exact same type of work all day. And with every bit of our school being run through a computer, it makes my school days not even feel like real life almost. I'm starting to lose all my drive to get my work done and study for any type of exams because I start to feel that all the work doesn't even matter. Any type of in-person learning would benefit us students so much. Even if it's just 1 day a week, it would greatly help by breaking up this schedule of online learning. And as of right now, I'm starting to dread these school days and weeks just because of how repetitive it is. But if we were to be back in person, I feel like I would really start to look forward to these school days rather than dread them like I currently am. And I know I speak for so many of my peers on this issue. I hope we are heard, and thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Let's see, can we let in the next speaker?
I wouldn't even think.
Go ahead, Mr. Bowling.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much for your time. So I am in Maple Glen. I have 2 children in Jarretttown kindergarten and 4th grade, and you know, both are still in the Cardinal Academy. And I cannot say enough about what the experience has been. It's not ideal, admittedly, and you know, my children are having the same challenges that everyone else has, but I think they're doing an amazing job in providing the resources and support, and you know, and they're being agile in the way that they're adapting with that. You know, my kindergartner, admittedly, is actually doing much better now than he had previously when he was in a preschool. They're doing such a good job. So there is that. That said, you know, my 4th grader is struggling. And so I understand the argument on both sides. My concern is that, you know, one size does not fit all. And I feel like that us trying to grade and come up with a solution for, you know, kindergarten, elementary versus middle versus high school, to me, doesn't really make sense. And also, quite frankly, to compare grocery workers or service workers who are forced to work, who are adults and understand and are able to follow rules is an apples and oranges conversation versus me trying to get my 6-year-old to not pick their nose. So, you know, my concern is that, you know, that we still be able to have these options in place, because I realize, as we're seeing at a national level right now, best efforts, people are still getting sick. And even in Montco right now, certain numbers are still going up. So my concern is sort of that triad right now, that if we were forced back into an environment in which we had to do in person, you know, are the 3 things that can give us the best chance of success in people staying healthy: testing, physical distancing, and you know, requiring of masks going to be in place? Because we know that we drop one of those out of the equation and the percentage chance of somebody getting sick goes up exponentially. I mean, I look around in my neighborhood right now, they're filled with kids, and none of them, save my own, are wearing masks when they're out playing outside of school, and none of them are keeping distance from each other. So it's not even so much about what's happening in the school, but what's happening outside of it and how that's being carried back in, and how even in a perfect world, even if we were requiring kids to get testing, which I think we should, there's no way of knowing in that range when it could be 3 to 5 days before they show positive that they could be spreading the disease. Also, you know, the concern about the number of staff that we would have in place to monitor that, to make sure in places like the cafeteria, where it's been acknowledged that the amount of space that would be available cannot, by design, even utilizing additional space, be enough to meet that 6-foot requirement. Are there going to be enough staff in place to make sure we're monitoring that and policing the kids, keeping them apart, making sure that they're putting the mask on when they're not eating or drinking? And right now, I'm aware of the fact that we just don't have all the answers to that. So I feel like, even if it's a matter of, you know, I understand why people want kindergartners to go back to school, how challenging that to be. But to me, that's the group that are having the hardest time to remember to pull their mask up, to not be touching their face, to wash their hands, to not be touching other kids or keeping their distance. And even, is there a way to have a conversation where let the high school students go back to school, because we have a better belief that they're going to be able to monitor that? So I just want to make sure these are all questions and part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowling. Ms. Evans, can you let the next speaker in?
Go ahead, Ms. Cole.
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, good evening. This was written obviously prior to tonight's meeting, so I'm happy to hear the results of the survey, the overwhelming results that the community is interested in returning to school. And that's obviously why I'm here to speak tonight. And I'm happy with your efforts to get us back to school. As a pediatric nurse practitioner with an advanced degree in public health, I've been an essential worker since the pandemic started. And I feel qualified to speak on these matters as well as the well-being of children. I'd be happy to join a group of qualified providers in the community on any return to school guidelines that are happening. I am not aware of any that includes the community. I understand the overwhelming burden that you guys are all facing, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of the burden that UD families are facing as well. Like I said, an essential worker, I work outside the home daily. My preschooler is at nursery school, and I have a 2nd grader who attends the Y a few days a week. And so my husband can actually get some work done at home. You know, our weekends are normal. We have soccer, we have baseball. We can go out to eat if we choose. We wear masks, we're safe, and we can even attend a large sporting event with more people than our elementary school can hold, as per Governor Wolf's recent ruling. Then comes our weekday, where we are living a life that Upper Dublin decided for us. We are paying for childcare in addition to our high taxes. My oldest is in 2nd grade, and he attends the YMCA that hasn't closed once. We have been there also in the spring because they have essential childcare worker as well. And it was run very well, and we haven't had any concerns. From the bios that I noticed of the school board, it doesn't seem like anybody has any younger than maybe a 4th grader. So just hoping to give you some pieces of our day. My husband is trying to work. He has to check in with our second grader probably every 5 to 10 minutes to make sure that he's on track. We get kicked out of meetings, class meetings, and computers shut down, and we have to log back on. We often find him playing or reading something other than what he's supposed to be doing, some crying, and all of this while, we're expected to work full time. The only highlight of his day is to finish up and play outside with the neighbors. He really has become apathetic about school, as I hear from many, many parents. And who can blame him? He sits in front of a computer all day, has little social interaction with schoolmates, and has never obviously met his teacher in person. And she's doing a great job. When I asked my 7-year-old what he wanted me to say, he said, "Can you ask when I'm allowed to come back to school? I miss it and I want to go back." One question I have that I haven't gotten an answer on is in regards to the metrics and how these compare to other schools that are open, especially those in Montgomery County. If we are considered a moderate transmission, then so are the schools nearby. For the metrics that includes incidents, will you be stratifying by ages like the Pennsylvania Department of Health is? So breaking down by age group 5 to 9, 9 to 15, and so on, so that we're not affected by elderly or college-age students where rates may be higher. And if not, then it looks like this metric will never be met out of the 3. And finally, neighboring schools are opening safely. Child care centers are safely open, and many have plans this month to return. And so I feel like we are an outlier now, with the exception of 2, very nearby schools. So I'm asking that you open schools prior to November, making 1st and 2nd grade priorities. These kids cannot learn on their own, as well as other formative years like transition years, and not waste any more valuable time getting our kids to learn. Thank you, and I appreciate all your efforts.
Thank you. Ms. Evans, can you let the next person in?
Go ahead, Ms. Ashcraft.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I want to address the inequity that has been created by the virtual learning environment that has solely been created by the school board. Ironically so, it was a third of the presentation tonight. Upper Dublin has prided itself on an excellent, equitable education for all students. However, not all students can learn equally through a computer. Everyone also knows that each environment at home has different levels of conduciveness to learning for a variety of reasons. This should be obvious to every board member. It should also be known that COVID-19 has many different, conflicting scientific opinions. There have been varying opinions on how to best mitigate the virus against other public health measures, such as mental health, physical health, and economic health. There has been a lot of uncertainty and conflicting science around it. Many local schools are way closer to normal, and their respective Department of Health officials have shown no increase in COVID-19. Why is a group of 9 Upper Dublin citizens driving these decisions when so many Upper Dublin citizens disagree? If parents feel unsafe, they can choose to educate their child virtually. If parents feel safe, allow them to have their children return to school. This should be an individual choice, not a groupthink decision taken by 9 school board members. 9 school board members that have refused to answer questions about details on why this decision was taken in late July, and have not adequately responded to everyone's questions about when and how schooling will return to normal, and why in-person learning is not an option right now at this moment. It is extremely disappointing that Upper Dublin continues to take this course of action. If equity in learning was the top goal of the district, perhaps your actions would be more about creating a safe and equitable environment in the moment. I'd also like everyone listening to this to consider there are questions posed by citizens to this school board that have been open questions and open for several months. Some answers given have been very vague, and metrics have changed without clear reasoning and rationale. In fact, after the decision was made in July, no metrics were given whatsoever. What does that say about the governance of this school board and the district that questions from citizens can remain open for that long? This is the manner this board has chosen to behave, to dictate to citizens, to ignore citizens. This board and administration team know the short-term and long-term effects that gaps in education create. You have now added to that. While all of your concern appears to be about safety from COVID-19, there has been very little action that shows concern for the inequity in learning that has been created solely by virtual learning in the present moment and the past months. There is no absolute solid reason why all students should not be given the option to be back in school right now, starting tomorrow. Instead, the decision is largely based on fear. Each day, there is more data and science pointing that children can safely return to school and need to return to school. Each day you wait to implement a plan further damages our children. Let each family decide what is best for them. Give people back their freedom on how to live their lives. Stop dictating and controlling. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ashcroft. Ms. Evans, I see a few more people in the waiting room, so please, can you let in the next person?
Ms. Marchuk, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Hi, good evening. My name is Emily Marchuk. I am a resident of Maple Glen. I have two children in Upper Dublin schools, one in 8th grade at Sandy Run and one in 5th grade at Jarretttown. I am also a pediatric nurse. My stance on our current situation is that the kids need to be back in school. My kids are struggling with virtual. I have worked this whole pandemic and I've not contracted COVID. I'm a bedside nurse in a step down ICU. I was even exposed back in July, had to get tested, and I was negative. And the reason I believe is because PPE and hand hygiene saves lives. I believe we can implement safety measures and send the kids back to school safely. For example, my niece and nephew attend Catholic school. They've been in school since the start of September. They are wearing masks, they are distancing, and they are performing hand hygiene frequently. There have been 0 cases of COVID reported. My experience at work has been if you wear your mask, you wash your hands, your risk of contracting the virus is low. These kids are suffering mentally with the lack of routine and structure. As parents, we are stressed more than ever. We need our kids back in school. For those who want to do virtual, great, you can stay virtual. But we need our kids back in school for our own sanity and for their sanity. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Ms. Evans, the next person, please.
Go ahead, Ms. Foster.
Hi, my name's Lauren Foster. I live in Drescher and I have 2 kids in the district. My question is around the teacher concerns that keep being brought up. I keep hearing comments about teachers and them needing to come back or not getting paid. I am wondering if with the new parent survey that was done, if there's still concerns about staffing or if new teachers will have to be hired. My understanding is that teachers are given a choice based on medical and just preference, and those leaves will not be paid. So my question is, at this point, is there staffing issues, and is that something that is being addressed? And finally, I also keep hearing about the union and concerns that the union is recommending that we don't go back. I'm wondering if that information is available to community members, and if not, if we could hear a little bit more about the recommendations that are coming from our teachers and their union. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Evans, the next person, please.
Go ahead, Ms. Platt.
Hi, my name is Gus Platt. I'm a freshman at the high school. I live in Orland. And I just want to say that online school, I mean, it's not terrible. It's not interesting. It's not like exciting. Like regular school, people, I mean, they said they didn't like it, before COVID, they're like, oh, it's a Monday. I don't like Mondays. I don't like school. Now, I mean, it's completely changed, obviously. And they're like, oh, I wish I could get back in school. And my thought is that it's just like exciting to be with other people and be able to like talk with people and just see other people's faces, like not through a screen. And you can't do that if you are on a screen. So I'd just like to say, I think online learning, not terrible, but in person is much better.
All right, thank you, Gus. I think we have a few more. Ms. Evans?
Shimko.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Okay. I just want to tag on to what Heather and Emily said. I'm a nurse as well. And I teach at PCOM. I taught in August to the super spreaders in a small room with about probably 40 students, hands-on lab type situations. And that was in August. And now we're waiting until November. And I just want to reiterate that kids need to go back. It is a mental health issue, especially for our teenagers. I do understand the little ones need to go back for a million reasons, but people aren't focusing on the middle schoolers and the teenagers that are really, truly suffering. It's already a tough time in their lives. And, you know, now you're keeping them home and isolating them for months on end. So I'm not sure why we're still waiting till November. But I am glad that at least we're moving in the right direction. Also, I just want to add on that I'm glad that the full-time special need kids went back, but that leaves children like my son still struggling, who is special needs, but yet is not in a full-time special needs classroom. So he is still not back at school and now will not be returning until November. And basically that's it. That it can be done with some creativity and some hard work and creative thinking, and needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have one or two more, Ms. Evans.
Go ahead, Ms. Burns.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Lisa Burns from Fort Washington. And I just wanted to start out to say that I'm pleased that the school board is now moving forward and 100% giving parents the choice of in-person, full day, 5 days a week, starting November 9th. I want to thank Dr. Yanni for all of his tireless work that he's put into getting our district to this point. I'm pleased that the school board does not have to vote for in-person learning for November 9th, and that parents can now finally plan full steam ahead for this. I also want the school board to understand that this community is hanging on by a mere thread. And with this meeting, we are putting our trust in each and every one of you, that you will follow through with all that has been said on this call tonight, and that there will be no new surprises. There's a large part of this community that will not rest until we are given the choice for in-person learning. This community is counting on you. Our kids are counting on you. Please make this happen for the mere well-being of this very fragile community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Evans?
I think, hold on a second. Let me get situated here. Go ahead, Mr. Siriani.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much for your time. Tom Sirianni from Maple Glen, 3 children in the middle school. So I'm not a medical professional, and I love the fact that we heard from a range of medical professionals this evening that could speak from firsthand experience. But I will tell you that I have a unique experience in my profession to work hand in hand with medical professionals across all parts of northeastern United States, and specifically working with thoracic surgeons, pulmonologists, critical care physicians, and emergency department directors. From New York, New Jersey, Metro New York, Long Island, Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, DC, and Virginia. And I've had the opportunity to speak with them personally. In fact, as recently as last evening, the chairman of critical care at a 14 hospital system, and asked them about back to school and the risks. And frankly, he laughed, said a few other things which I will not share in a public forum, and basically said, get your kids back to school, period. Get your kids back to school. He's managed through the peak of the epicenter of more than 150 patients on a ventilator. He's seen it all. And this is one of several physicians that I've spoken with across all parts of the region. And they said, look, is there a risk? This physician last evening said, is there a risk? He said, yeah, there's a risk. The potential exists and it's not going to go away. Wash your hands, wear your mask, social distance, and put your kids in class. And he said, there's no way that that risk is greater than the risk that they are causing these children with depression, anxiety, lack of motivation to learn. We've heard from children, we've heard from parents tonight. It is incredible how debilitating this dynamic is, not for all, but for some. And I want you to think about this. It's not been since September that they've been in isolation, if you will. It's been since March. That is what's weighing on 8, 9, 10, 11. I have 12 and 14-year-olds. That's what's weighing on them. Physicians across the entire region that I've interacted with, we've heard from the professional tonight saying it can be done safely. We know it's being done safely at the other districts. The 9 of you need to recognize it needs to be done safely. Waiting until November, I think, is well, an excuse of complacency. It could be done tomorrow, but at least we're going in the right direction. My final minute, I will share another scenario that happened this week in terms of virtual learning. When I'm not traveling, I work out of the home and I'm online with my meetings. I have 3 children online as well, of which the bandwidth is overridden and we get kicked off. Multiple issues this week. Not sure the source, but it's happened. One of my children, who once got back on, was confronted and was said in the public forum, I don't believe you. It's a likely excuse. And asked the children of the class to vote as to whether or not they believed my child. I will not release the teacher's name or which one of my children it was because it's not worth it. I'm sure that teacher is stressed as well, and I kind of understand it. But those are the dynamics that we're dealing with when one of my children had to come in my office, and I had to send an email out to the parents explaining that I have Comcast in front of my house trying to solve a problem. That is definitely not the way to learn. Provide the option to the parents. Let us bear the burden of the risk if we feel it's safe to go in. If we feel it's better for our children to be at home.
Go ahead, Ms. Navarro. Ms. Navarro?
Yeah.
Let's come back to her. Can we go to the
Yeah.
next?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Ms. Nardello.
Hi, my name is Nadine Nardello. I am a mother of a 1st grader, 6th grader, and 8th grader. I am also a pediatric nurse practitioner at CHOP, and I have been working since March at CHOP. And We've all been healthy. Everyone in my household has been healthy, but we've all been working since March. And I just wanted to say thank you to the teachers. Actually, my children have been doing really well, surprisingly, on the virtual learning. The teachers have done an amazing job. So I do want to say thank you to the teachers, and I also want to say thank you to the board for letting us speak. I am happy to hear that the plan is to send these kids back in November. At the same time, though, it's a little disheartening because I feel that the next 3 weeks could be really essential to us. And yes, our numbers can look a lot different come November, and I hope that doesn't impact the board's ruling to send these children back. I just feel that right now we have some valuable time with the weather still being mild. Our children could be back in the classroom. They could be, doing things outside while the weather is warm, because I'm not quite sure what's going to happen in November and December. And I'm thankful that, yes, hopefully everything goes according to plan and we are back in school in November. But at the same time, I feel like we're missing a lot of good opportunity right now to have these children back in the school. Really, I don't see a reason why they can't start on Monday. So far, so good with the children that have been back so far in our surrounding schools. And these children have been wearing masks since March, since April, and they're really good at doing what they need to do. And children are really resilient, and I feel like we're not giving our kids enough credit to do what needs to be done to get them back in the classroom. Mask wearing, good hand hygiene, and a little bit of confidence. And I feel that everyone needs a little bit of confidence to get their children back into the classroom, to get these teachers back in the classroom. COVID is not going away. This is something that we will be dealing with, and we just need to not let fear guide our decisions. And we really just need to be smart about things. Good hand hygiene, mask wearing, give our children a chance to get back into the classroom. And, I hope everything goes according to plan and we are really back in that classroom in November. But at the same time, I just wanted to say, I just feel that these next 3 weeks really could benefit the students if we could get them back sooner than November. Thank you again.
Thank you. Ms. Evans.
Oh, go ahead, Ms. Navarra. And by the way, I just wanted to let everyone know that I'm timing on my phone. Word Docs is not, the stopwatch is not working.
So there's 4 minutes. All right.
Yes, and I will mute their microphone at the 4-minute mark.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, thanks again for hearing from all of us. It seems like there's, as I was saying earlier, a recurring theme here, and I'm glad that we've been given this time to share that. And I understand the value of hearing one's voice. As a teacher, I say this all the time. It's one of my mantras in class, that your voice is important, make sure it's heard. In this case, and in the honor of equity and in keeping our community afloat, I think there's a little bit of a nuance here. This should not be a matter of opinion about how one family fares over another, how one kid likes a computer, how one doesn't. I really only want to hear from the opinion in that case from our students, and I loved hearing from some of our students today here. I have a kindergartner and a 3rd grader. My husband and I both work full-time. I'm a teacher. My husband's a graphic designer. I kind of feel like I don't have to tell you about my day. Anyone who's had kids and has kids understands, can probably fill in the blanks on their own. Both my kids, because we both work and we have to keep a roof over our head, they go to daycare and they're in a pod and they're going to the YMCA, and they wear a mask happily all day long. I do too at work. And we distinctly remember the day we learned the school just suddenly decided to go all virtual. Somebody from the team, some admin mentioned that the YMCA was opening its facilities to families, even though they're going all virtual. And I really want to linger on that line for a second, because literally in the same breath we were told that the school was going all virtual. One of the team members from I think a curriculum development informed us the YMCA is available for a very hefty fee for childcare while we worked. I wouldn't want to say that nobody cares about working kids' family, working families, because I would think we make up the majority. I know we do, but it sends a really clear message that UD doesn't seem to care much about the possible exposure to kids of working parents. We watch our Wissahickon friends and all students all over the country actually going to school, literally right across the street, which shows and proves that the interpretation of local COVID activity and the decision to go virtual or in person depends not on medical expert advice, but instead on who sits on one's school board. I'm worried, and that is not equitable. I'm worried we haven't seen a hybrid plan and what this will do if we wait until November and have to look at the metrics again. How are we expected to socially distance without a hybrid plan? And I just sincerely hope that for once that this perspective is heard, because it's very clear, decision after decision after decision, that the fact that people have to work and keep a roof over their head has not been considered very often by this district, which is kind of hard to wrap your head around. But I do want to say how awesome the teachers have been. They really have been amazing. I write to them frequently and tell them that they're really awesome, awesome people. But I hope that the right decision is made for all the right reasons. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Johnson.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Johnson. I live in Ambler, and I have a first grader going to Fort Washington Elementary School. First of all, I just want to thank you guys so much for all the hard work that you've been doing over the last few months. I am new to being a parent in Upper Dublin. I grew up here, and I've really enjoyed listening to all the Zoom meetings, and thank you so much for including us and allowing us to give our input. His teacher is fabulous, for Washington is fabulous, and I just wanted to thank you guys for that. But I also just had a couple questions about what I thought the meeting was about tonight. With assessment and hearing about the equity work was just very exciting, and I wanted to say if there's any way that parents can partner in on some of this work, that I would really love the opportunity. And for assessment, I was wondering about, since he's a first grader and reading is so very important and I have a reading background, I was just curious about when the first graders will be assessed in their reading levels so that they could start small group reading, because he hasn't, I don't think, been assessed since like March. So I was just curious about how that would go. And I know a lot of parents are talking about the Cardinal Academy, and I think that it has been going better than hoped, and that today my son was sick. I took him to the doctor's office. Thank goodness he only has strep throat, but the doctors did say that there is a slight uptick, but you can have a COVID test and get the return back within 2 days, which is also nice. So I'm just thankful that you are giving options, and that you are trying your best to keep all of our kids safe, because I can tell how much you truly care about what you guys are doing, and I'm just very grateful. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Evans, I do not see anybody in the waiting room. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, then let's close the waiting room. I have 4 more community inputs that were mailed in prior to. I just took a break from reading them. So I'll take a moment to read those, and then the board can respond after that. Let me just check that I have everything here. All right, here's input from Robert Miller at Glenside. Virtual learning has been a failed experiment with many network connection problems. for both the teachers and students, and our students' education has suffered. Montgomery County has the best COVID numbers since the beginning of the pandemic. Many school districts have already moved from virtual to in-person. We can't afford to wait another month. Our children need to be in school now. It's time to transition back into an in-person learning, or at least for elementary school kids. Then Michelle St. Pierre, Maple Glen, many thanks to all teachers, administrators, and the board for all the efforts taken to ensure the safety of our students and the quality of their education during these very difficult times. My questions: what specific actions need to be taken in order to return our students to the classroom by no later than November 9th? What specific criteria must be met? Will this criteria be reasonable and not focused on zero risk requirement? How have other schools in our area successfully returned to the classroom, and what prevents Upper Dublin from emulating those actions? Our public comment: it is our family's belief that return to in-person instruction is critically needed to ensure that our students receive an effective quality education. While the efforts of teachers and students have been nothing short of heroic in Cardinal Academy, it's not an effective way to learn for many students, my children included, not from lack of engagement and effort on their teachers' part. They need the value of being in school. Many other schools in our area have been doing this with success and reasonable risk. I say reasonable because there is not a zero risk scenario in the short term or ever, as this virus will always exist. I urge the board to give our students the opportunity to return to the classroom as soon as possible while managing risk to a reasonable level and leveraging the learnings of schools that have achieved in-person instruction. Thank you again for your tireless support of our students. And Nicole Robinson in Treasure, what plan does the school district have in place to minimize disruption and seamlessly continue education for the children who will remain in Cardinal Academy? I have a stepchild in a different school district that began hybrid last week, and it has been an incredible disruption to his learning and schedule. He remained for 100% virtual to accommodate the children who return to in-person learning. I'm concerned this will happen when children return to school and we remain in Cardinal Academy. Is the school district communicating with other districts who have returned to in-person to learn from the hardship they have been experiencing? Then Ms. Weisberg, did she speak already today? No. I would like to confirm that as long as Montgomery County remains as a moderate or below risk of community spread, and the health and safety plan as approved on July 29th remains the same, Upper Dublin students will resume some form of in-person learning on November 9th. In other words, is there any other factor that could prevent resumption of in-person learning, including a motion by any board member to take a vote to further extend the time for implementing the approved plan beyond November 9th? And then Chelsea Leary from Ardsley. If adults can go to bars and casinos and everything else that adults can do, why do the kids have to suffer? All three of my kids are suffering tremendously because they are not in person. The rates are going up and down. This thing is never going to go away, so we need to figure out a way to coexist with it. The kids need to be in class. There is a safe way to do it, and stop pushing it back to flu season. And give everybody an answer as soon as possible, so that way some families can figure out if they need to pull their child to send them to private school or somewhere else that is open. Majority of us need answers now. We need to plan things out. You can't do what you did in the summer and last minute tell us it's all virtual and have everybody scrambling to figure it out. I have a private school right now down the street from me, and those kids are so happy and have been back in school and nothing. My youngest has been in a daycare since April and nothing. There is a way to do it, so do it. And that is the balance of the community input that was submitted. So at this point, I would like any board member, or perhaps Dr. Yanni, would you like to start with comments?
Sure, I think I can address, Mrs. Sherbier, most of these points. We will make sure the points are also included in the frequently asked question and document, and the communication that goes out either tomorrow or Friday. I want to remind everyone that the administration, including the superintendent and the board, are working together toward the common goal of providing the option for resuming in-person instruction. It was asked if full days are the goal, and that's yes. And school days can count without lunch. There's a minimum number of minutes that are required for a day to count. It's been brought up in this meeting and other that our unions are a problem and that there are potential staff concerns. There are no union complications, and if right now there are no staffing concerns, if there are staffing concerns that come up, over the last couple of years, we've built a collaborative relationship with both our professional staff and support staff unions, and we will work through any issues that arise. I'm glad that someone said one size doesn't fit all, because we know different age groups, school looks different for different groups of kids. So we are taking that into account as we finalize our return to school plan. Someone mentioned liking to hear from students. Just as there was a parent, guardian, and family survey that went out, there will be a student survey going out as well. Someone mentioned metrics and that the board wasn't using metrics. Let me be clear, I'm the one using metrics, not the board. The metrics that we put in the Touch Base Tuesday are from the Pennsylvania early warning COVID dashboard that became available in September. So I started making that public for our community so that you could see what we were seeing. There was no attempt by our board not to share or show metrics. I take a bit of exception when people say we're operating out of fear. We're operating under the best information that we have. One of the things that we want to ensure is that we have consistency so that when we do provide the option for students to come back, that we don't put kids in a situation where we're constantly having to re-roster when there are issues. We want to do what we can to ensure that there is consistency both in teaching practices and in classroom assignments. Someone asked if there's anything standing in the way of reopening in November. Barring our county being put into the substantial transmission designation, I don't see anything that would prevent us from opening. One of the things we've been compared a lot to other districts. If you look at the districts around us, I'd like to point out, based upon the latest data that I have, Wissahickon at the elementary is open. The secondary level is virtual. Their return rate was between 65 and 70% of students. Wissahickon also added over 10 teaching positions to open their schools. Souderton is open, and Lower Moreland is open, and most recently Lower Marion is opening. You'll be hearing from several other school districts over the next couple of days, or your friends in those areas, in those other districts, because other districts are announcing their return to school plans, and very similar to what we have planned here. Again, there will be a communication that will go out Thursday or Friday. The frequently asked question document will be updated, and just a final reminder that the administration and the board is working toward the common goal of being able to provide in-person instruction. Thank you, Mrs. Sherpier.
Thank you, Dr. Yanni. Is there anybody on the board who would like to comment, have questions? I see Mr. Soroda's hand. Go ahead, Mr. Soroda.
Two things. One is I just want to clarify, because in this large number of comments, I think there's some potential misinformation here. And I just want to clarify that my understanding is the board has approved already. In July, we approved that the schools would reopen on November 9th. If that remains the plan, and if it's consistent with the existing health and safety plan, then the board need take no additional action. So there is currently no plan for the board to take any specific action between now and November 9th regarding this.
That's correct.
And then the other thing I just want to strongly encourage, because we do need to stay out of the, what's the name of the category, Dr. Yanni?
Substantial transmission.
Yes, out of the substantial transmission rate. Everybody please install the COVID Alert PA app. It doesn't compromise your privacy in any way. We need a large number of people to install and use this to help keep our numbers where they are. It could make a really, really big difference. So just taking the opportunity to use the Bully Pulpit, please install that app. Thanks.
All right. Anybody else wants to comment? I do want to thank the attendees to this meeting. I also want to especially thank the students who added their perspective, as well as the parents who spoke or submitted material. I do want to remind everybody there is a lot of material that the district puts out, and especially on Tuesdays, but also the frequently asked questions. There is much of material out there, so if people want to check that, that's available on the website. We all look forward to hearing from Dr. Yanni in his next communications on the plans ahead. So I think we are then at the end of the meeting. So I just want to let people know that the next education meeting will take place on Wednesday, November 4th at 6 p.m. I expect that will still be a virtual meeting, but we'll hear more updates on that. And then I'd like to adjourn. Thank you all very much.
Dr. Yanni, board members, anybody need a break before we go into policy, or should we just keep going? I'm okay to go if everyone else is.
I think we should just, I'm fine going right into policy.
Yeah, I'm good to keep going.
I'm going to go briefly off camera to have a snack because I have not eaten dinner.
Sounds good. Sensing that that's the majority, I'm going to call to order the policy committee meeting of the district for October the 7th, 2020. Welcome everyone. We have, I believe it's 4 second readings and 4 first readings tonight to discuss. Before we get to that, Dr. Yanni, any announcements or communications?
None this evening, Mr. Wallach.
Thank you. We have minutes from September the 9th that have been available for review. Pursuant to our policy, I would ask the members of the committee whether they have any questions or comments. Obviously, if any other board members do as well, please speak now.
None from me.
Excellent. Anyone? If anyone does, please raise your hand. If not, in order to keep things moving, I will ask the committee members to join me in moving that item to the legislative agenda. Members of the committee, is that acceptable?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. We will move those along, and that will get us to our policy report and recommendations. We'll start with agenda item number 501, which is our second reading. These are policies we talked about last month. There have been a couple of minor but non-substantive changes to a few of them. We'll look at each one briefly. We've talked about them all in some level of detail last month. The first one is 249, bullying/cyberbullying. One thing just to point out is we did refine some of the definitions as we talked about in the last meeting. There's now a definition of cyberbullying that was added, and the definition of bullying itself has been clarified a little bit in order to address some of the items we discussed at last month's meeting on first reading. Dr. Yanni, anything else you would like to point out about this second reading?
No. I mean, you pointed out, we just clarified the definitions and added some clarifying information.
Do any of my committee members or any other board members have any questions or comments about 249?
No.
Okay. All right. Going once, going twice. I will then suggest we move 249 for second reading to the legislative agenda. And I want to thank everybody for a lot of work, I think, that went into refining that policy a little bit, that I think it's in good shape. We'll move to 256, which is the dating violence policy. Dr. Yanni, anything new that we need to notice that, in this policy?
Just under the complaint procedure, where a student, if they need to report anything, we added, in addition to the building principal, counselor, classroom teacher, we added or any trusting adult.
Excellent. Committee members, any questions or comments? Mr. Sirota.
Yeah, the any trusted adult I don't think really works for me, because any trusted adult may not have the same responsibility to handle it in the same way as the building principal, counselor, or teacher. I think there needs to be structure. I mean, around more structure than that around the reporting process, so that we can have confidence that anything that gets reported is handled.
So I think,
sorry, Steve, go ahead.
What I'm comfortable saying, Mr. Sirota, is that if it's to anyone other than the principal or the counselor, they have to make contact with the principal or counselor. All school district employees are mandated reporters.
Right.
And so even bus drivers, custodians, cafeteria workers, everybody is a mandated reporter, and they go through that training on a yearly basis. But we can put the caveat in there that if it's reported to someone other than the counselor or the principal, it needs to make its way to the counselor or the principal.
Okay, yeah, right, that's a good point. I was thinking potentially of other trusted adults who may not even be mandated reporters. Like this isn't necessarily going to be read by a student. Okay, how do I handle this? I'll go read the policy. I don't think that's very likely.
Sure.
I mean, it'd be great if everybody reads the policies, but we can acknowledge that doesn't happen. I mean,
Mark, could we say trusted adult who is employed by the district, because that would cover all trained employees and would eliminate people like someone's priest or rabbi or pastor or outside.
That'd be great. Yeah, any other school district employee, I think, would be fine. And I also appreciate, and those reports must get to the principal or counselor. It would also be helpful wording.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Agreed.
Ashley just reminded me via text, every single employee is getting Title IX training this year. So yeah, so I think that language, I'm comfortable with that.
Excellent. We will make that change. Any other questions or comments on its policy 256? Seeing none, with the agreement of the committee and making that change, we will move that forward to the legislative agenda.
Yes.
Excellent. Everybody agree? Perfect. Next policy up is 317, which is disciplinary procedures. This will replace our current policy 317. Dr. Yanni, anything to point out here on second reading?
No, I will allow Ashley to weigh in if she has anything that she would like to add.
I don't. I feel comfortable with how this is being put forward.
Great. Thank you. Committee members or other members of the board, any questions or comments on 317?
No.
Okay. Excellent. Members of the committee, everybody in agreement that we can move 317 to the legislative agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you all. Our last second reading of this evening is 824, which is maintaining appropriate boundaries with students. This will supersede policy 831. Dr. Yanni, anything on second reading on this policy?
No, there was nothing.
committee members or other board members, any questions or comments on 824?
No.
Yeah, I have one quick one. The language, it's new language down toward the bottom on about giving a student a ride in a privately owned vehicle. Adds unless a second adult.
Yes, I'm sorry. Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Soretta.
Does that second adult need to be a school district employee, or any second adult qualifies for this purpose?
We have to say, actually, I want to strike number 13. What we did was in the teacher's contract, we said that we wouldn't be giving rides in privately owned vehicles. So I apologize, I missed my flag on this. So it's giving a student, we can only transport students in district transportation and when there's at least two people present.
So if we strike number 13, as I read the policy, this is an example of something that is prohibited.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying it's adequately prohibited in other documents. Is that
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Yep.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
That makes sense. Okay. Any other questions or comments on 824? No. Seeing none, if members of the committee agree with that one change to number 13 just discussed, we will move 824 to the legislative agenda. Everybody in agreement?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you all for that work on the second readings. We'll move to agenda item 502, which is second reading repeals. This is to repeal, it's policies 417 and 517, and this has to do with the consolidation of policies into the 300 section. So those policies are now encapsulated in 317, which we just discussed on second reading. Any questions or comments on those repeals?
No.
Great. Seeing none, members of the committee, can we move that to the legislative agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We'll move to 503, which is our first readings. Some new policies to discuss, the first of which is policy 203, which is immunization and communicable diseases. Dr. Yanni, if you would on this one.
Sure. So just for matter of clarity and formatting, when Mr. Wallach and Ms. Evans and I met to review our policy work, our first reading policy work, we added a purpose statement, and we're going to do that moving forward just so that all the policies have the same key elements. The major thrust of this policy is really to ensure that language around board-approved health and safety plans gets embedded into the policy. So you see that under authority. And there are two new definitions that we're comfortable with: certificate of immunization and medical certificate. Under the guidelines, Mr. Wallach, Ms. Evans, and I talked a lot about this, but we actually checked the language in school code. All students shall be immunized against specific diseases in accordance with state law and regulations, unless specifically exempt for religious or medical reasons or strong moral or ethical convictions similar to a religious belief. And that's actually spelled out that way in the school code. But we just wanted to bring everyone's attention to that. And then as we move down throughout the policy, monitoring of the immunization is really done by our school nurses. So we moved building principal and head teacher. And then there are a number of items, those 4 points that we will move to an AR to accompany this policy. And I think with that, Mr. Wallach, I think we were comfortable with the rest of the policy as it had been recommended to be revised by PSBA.
Agreed, Dr. Yanni. The only other thing I'll point out is there's a section at the end with health records that is stricken out, and that is actually in the next policy will be discussed. That we didn't want it to be duplicative, so I think that was the reason it was stricken there. But I didn't want anyone to think that that provision is just disappearing from policy.
Correct.
Questions or comments from the board? Just one thing before I get to that, just to echo what Dr. Yanni said. I think it's a good idea, and my suggestion going forward is that we try to put a purpose statement into each of our policies so that a reader, a community member can see up front why this policy is important to our school district. The language and the intent of that is often subsumed within other parts of our policy, but I agreed with Dr. Yanni and think that would be a good practice for us to adopt going forward, and you'll see that this evening, members of the committee and the board. So with that, questions or comments, Mr. Sirota?
Just first, I want to say thanks for doing that purpose statement and making those statements about the purpose statement. I've been advocating for quite some time that all of our policies should have the same heading sections in the same order. So I strongly agree with that. I want to clarify my understanding. So the strong moral or ethical conviction similar to a religious belief, that phrase is straight out of school code. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Then that's great, because otherwise I was going to have a long discussion about it. But if we can just point to school code for that language, then we can be done a lot sooner.
It doesn't sound like it would be school code.
No, but that's
Doesn't.
yeah, that's right. But if it's in school code that way, that's the way it should be. So the only thing I'll point out is that in the third and fourth paragraphs in this section, it does mention medical exemption or religious belief, and it doesn't account for a moral or ethical conviction. So I think we need to add that clause or otherwise encapsulate it in a definition or something so we don't have to repeat it 3 times, so that other places where we say unless exempted for medical or religious reasons, it also allows for an exemption for moral or ethical reasons.
Mark, I thought about that when I read the paragraphs, and let me play devil's advocate for a moment.
Yeah.
That under the code, the only way a moral or ethical conviction qualifies if it's quote unquote similar to a religious belief. So as I thought about it, if you look at the third paragraph there, it says exemption for religious grounds or a physician certification, which is essentially the medical exemption. So, as much as I hear what you're saying, I kind of thought that since the moral conviction has to rise to a level of a religious belief, that just saying religious grounds covers that. Now, again, I'm playing devil's advocate. We could probably come up with other language. I worry a little bit that if we repeat that phrase 3 different times, it just gets a little bit wordy. But,
well, that's why I was thinking maybe we put it in a definition and then use a smaller phrase. My concern is that religion to some readers, religious belief to some readers really means something very specific. And we need this to cover all kinds of future readers, not just us.
I like the idea of simplifying it down with an abbreviation or a one-word term that we'll use throughout, because I tend to concur that demographics are even changing about how people view what is religion, what is faith, what is philosophy, what is moral conviction. So I think
I'm happy to look at it, and then Mr. Wallach, maybe you and I can offline, we can figure out how to best address it.
Sure, happy to do that.
And that's all my comments on this one. If you can actually just between now and next month, just point me to the section of school code where that is, I'd appreciate it.
I'll email you tomorrow, yeah, because it was funny when Mr. Wallach and Ms. Evans and I met, we were like, wait, let's pull the language right from school code because it can't be written that way. And sure enough.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. Ms. Ianniti, your hand is up. Jen, you there? Jen, I think you might be on mute, maybe? No?
Can you hear me now?
Yep,
Yes.
we can hear you.
My
Go
headphones.
for it.
Okay. So I just am wondering, this section down here that's in green, a medical exemption for a specific antigen, it's kind of confusing to me. And I just want to make sure, like when we put if we make this policy, it doesn't affect other immunizations that kids might not have if they're immunocompromised or if they've already had the communicable disease. So is this taken from school code? That might answer my question. Maybe that's the question I should ask. Or I'm just confused by it. I'm afraid it's going to affect kids who have had chickenpox or are immunocompromised. But we don't think that's the case, no?
I mean, I don't know whether that comes from school code exactly. Dr. Yanni, I don't know if you know.
No, it was a carryover from the existing policy.
Yeah. I mean, the way I read that, just to inform people, is that if there was a medical exemption that was documented by a physician per the policy above for a specific antigen, meaning that's why a child couldn't get immunized, that should be documented so that the medical exemption is limited to a specific immunization, and then in the next sentence, all other immunizations are still required. That's just how I read that phraseology. But I mean, Dr.
If a student can't get if they're immunocompromised,
okay,
does this change their status? So some students maybe can't get a vaccination and they have a medical reason. I don't know.
Why don't I ask our attorney to look at that and make sure that we're not doing something unintended by having that language in there? Because I hear your concern. There are some kids that can't get certain vaccines because of a condition or conditions that they have. So why don't I have Ed take a look at it and opine for us to see if he thinks that language hurts us in any way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Appreciate it. Any other questions or comments on 203? With that, with the indulgence of the committee, I think we can move that along for first reading. If anything in either Dr. Yanni's discussions with Mr. Diazio or anything else, changes anything substantive, we'll bring it back for another, potentially another first reading, but I'm comfortable moving that forward subject to looking at those couple of issues.
Right, and I'll reach out to him tomorrow. I don't think we'll have to bring it back for another first read. But we'll get clarification because I don't want to do anything that's going to wind up undoing what we're trying to do with the policy.
Exactly. Committee members, we okay with moving that forward as such?
Yes.
Yep.
Appreciate it. The next one we have for a first reading is 209, which is health examinations and screenings. Dr. Yanni, any background we should need to know about this one?
One second. Again, this policy brings on board the language of board-approved health and safety plans. There is a health monitoring section that was added on the advice of PSBA. And I don't know, Mr. Wallach, we had some discussion around the efficacy of that section. I did look at several other districts that have retained that section in their policy. So I think I'm comfortable with it. So I didn't know if you wanted to have any more conversation about that, the section there in bold, the health monitoring portion of the policy.
I'm glad you looked into that, and I think there is some logic to it. Let's see if any committee members or board members either want to discuss that or any other part of the policy. Ms. Francic, your hand is up.
Yeah, I guess I want to go back to sort of what the intention of this is, and if it's to be responsive to the now or to the future, and how how much of, I mean, it's sort of like what you said about the last policy, you know, we don't want to get into unintentionally doing or saying something. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm just wondering how much of this is going to work, and would we have to redo this hypothetically because there is research and regulation coming that we don't know about yet. So I don't know if I can.
You know, the research that I did on this section, Mrs. Francic, I think with COVID and not knowing what comes after COVID, I think everyone's a little bit skittish. So I put this on my list of policies that I want to have us review every year. So I think I'm comfortable having it in, knowing that we'll review this policy on a yearly basis. And actually, we're going to review all the health policies on a yearly basis, just given the climate that we're in.
That's exactly what I was hoping you were going to say. Thank you.
Excellent. Mr. Sirota, your hand's up.
Yep, in the health monitoring section, just in that last paragraph in there, actually, why does it look different on my screen than I see it on the screen? Oh, it's under the health records section, actually. It says, the last section under health records, right above delegation of responsibility, says the district shall destroy health records only after the student has not been enrolled for at least 2 years. That wording is very ambiguous to me. I'm not clear, does that mean the district shall destroy them after 2 years? Or does it say they can't be destroyed that early, but you can hang on to them for a decade if you want? I'm not sure the intent, and I think it can be read in several different ways.
Yeah, so how about if we reword it to say the district shall destroy student health records?
Is the intent to destroy them after two years after they're enrolled?
Yes.
Hang on to them for 2 more years and then destroy.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, we don't need to do it now, but I
No,
would
but
like to clarify before it.
I'll read
legislative.
We need to make sure that it's affirmative and not clouded by the last part of that sentence.
That's a good catch. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're sharper than I am after 4 hours of meetings.
You know, when it comes to records retention, those things always, that's one of my things. You know.
All right. Any other questions or comments on 209? Seeing none, committee members, if you're in agreement, we will move 209 forward, tweaking that last point that Mr. Sirota raised. Everybody in agreement on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Next, we have 310, which is a new policy, teleworking. Dr. Yanni?
Well, I'll actually let Ms. Kitten speak to this policy.
Excellent.
Sure. I'm happy to see that we have this on the docket because I think this is more of a reality now than it ever has been. I am comfortable with the way that it's laid out and setting forth a lot of things in the AR rather than in the policy. The only thing that I wanted to point out was the second sentence under general conditions that says an employee may not telework as replacement for leave. I would like us to take that out as it's my job, one of my main job responsibilities, to meet, discuss, and go through an interactive leave process meeting with anybody who needs accommodations per the ADA. And really right now, especially, we don't want to lock ourselves into saying that we will never do something that we may need to, even on a small temporary basis for a quarantine or isolation that may be deemed as a reasonable accommodation. So I would hate to lock us out of being able to do that or be in violation of something.
So Ashley, why do you think that language originated there then? What's the problem it was trying to solve?
I think that a lot of people are saying, telework is great, let's do that, but let's not ever allow someone who may have otherwise been on a leave of absence to just work from home and say that they can do that. And I think it maybe was a quick fix to be added in, but really when you look at the implications of saying that on its face, it could be deemed discriminatory, so I would hate to leave it in.
Okay, I'm okay with
Makes
that.
sense. Yeah, me too.
Agreed.
Okay, committee members or board members, any questions or comments about 310 other than that one? All right, seeing none, we'll delete that sentence, but otherwise, committee members, we okay to move that to the legislative agenda as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you all. And our last first reading of this evening is 314, which is physical examination. Dr. Yanni or Ms. Kitten, either one of you?
Ms. Kitten, you were comfortable with the way this was written, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I mean, I think it reads pretty straightforward. Committee members or board members, any questions or comments about 314?
No.
Seeing none, if we're in agreement, we'll also move that to the legislative agenda. Does the committee concur?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. That was good work. We made good work of that. That'll finish our policy report and recommendation section. With that, we'll turn to the next item on the agenda, which is community input. I'm not aware of any questions that were submitted in advance for the policy committee meeting. As we always do, if any members of the community that are attending virtually would like to speak, please raise your hand, and Ms. Evans and I will work to get you in the room to speak. And if you do speak, please just let us know your name and where you're from in advance of your question or comment. I will pause for a moment just to double check.
There are no raised hands.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. I see the same thing on my screen. So with that, I will close community input for the policy committee meeting. With that, we have one informational announcement, which is that our next committee meeting will be Wednesday, November the 4th at 7:15, or immediately after the education committee meeting. And with that, I want to thank everybody, and we are adjourned.
Have a good evening,
night, all.
everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.